I won't fan the flames of hate.
CNN senior political commentator and former Obama administration senior advisor David Axelrod joins us, and Charlemagne the God, radio personality. He recently had the headline-making interview with Joe Biden and a fascinating interview with Rush Limbaugh. He's the best-selling author of Shook One, Anxiety Playing Tricks on Me. Charlemagne, the Joe Biden that's recently emerged after being mostly in his home in Delaware for the last couple of months, I'm wondering what you make of the contrast he's attempting to draw with President Trump.
Well, Anderson, first, thank you for having me. The contrast he's trying to make with President Trump, I think he did very well today in Philadelphia. You know, he said a lot of things that I wanted to hear. And I know it's dream selling season and politicians say what they need to in order to get elected, but I really enjoyed it. But I need some action. Like, I need him to really lean into blackness now. Like to me, it's like this. If Barack Obama was JFK, then Joe Biden needs to be Lyndon B. Johnson. You know, he has the opportunity to be as progressive as Lyndon B. Johnson. Lyndon B. Johnson may have been, labeled a racist, but his record doesn't reflect that. You know, LBJ's record shows that he has like the most effective progressive record on race and class of any Democratic president of the past 80 years. So I think, Biden's record in the Senate actually reflects very racist legislation, but he has a chance to correct that by doing right by black people.
David, do you think Joe Biden can do that?
Well, I think he can, and I think he has to, because I think the situation in the country, the things that used to be called progressive now appear pragmatic. There have to be answers to some of the really serious problems that have been laid bare by this virus and the economic situation that is going to continue to plague this country into the next administration. So I would expect that you'd see his campaign to begin to unravel, or unfurl, I should say, plans that are large in scope and ambitious, and get to some of the root causes of the problems that have drawn people to the streets, these historic problems.
Sure. I mean, I think there's a lot of Democrats who maybe see these large crowds of people protesting peacefully in the streets day after day after day and think, well, this election, it's obviously going to go for the Democrats. A lot of people thought that obviously in 2016. Do you see these crowds?
Exactly.
And do you think, this translates into what happens on election night?
No, it's not a sure thing at all, because we still don't know how Donald Trump won in 2016. A lot of people will say Donald Trump was an illegitimate president, just like how Joe Biden's leading in all the polls now. Hillary was doing, Senator Clinton was doing the same thing in 2016, and I think that's why it's very important for Joe Biden to really lean into blackness. I think he needs to announce one of these overly qualified sisters as his running mate, whether it's Senator Kamala Harris, Val Demings, Keisha Lance Bottoms, Stacey Abrams. He's already committed to putting a black woman on the Supreme Court, which would be his, Lyndon B. Johnson, Thurgood Marshall moment. If this country wants to get its soul right, like he said that the soul of the country is at stake, he really has to lean into the black community. He has to be the white guy who's willing to relinquish some of that power privilege allows him. As long as there's a system of white supremacy, there's going to always be oppression. And if we don't have elected officials who are willing to dismantle the mechanism of white supremacy, if we don't have elected officials who are willing to change legislation that disproportionately impacts black folks, it won't matter, and he's going to have trouble in November.
David, do you see your former boss, former President Obama, getting, or what kind of role do you see him, how vocal a role do you see him having moving forward?
Look, I think he'll play an active role. He did in 2018. He obviously feels strongly about the importance of this election. I don't think he's going to jump out in front of the candidate. Ultimately, Joe Biden's the man who's running for president, and he's going to have to carry a lot of the load here. And this was an important moment today, Anderson, because he stepped out at a time when the country really needed to hear from him, and he made a very powerful speech, and it was made more powerful in juxtaposition with what we saw last night, where it's very hard to be the president of law and order when you're holding a can of rhetorical kerosene in your hand. And that's what we saw last night. And we saw Biden step forward, not as someone seeking to be the candidate of a base of voters, but as someone who is seeking to be president of the United States and honestly searching for healing and understanding. And I think that's very powerful, but he's going to have to do it repeatedly, and he's going to have to be there to counter some of the negative energy of Donald Trump.
Charlemagne, when people hear the president saying, "I'm your law and order president," The thing I don't understand is it seems to me one of the things that the protesters at their core are asking for is law and order. They just want the law to be equally meted. They don't want to be different under the law. They don't want law and order shouldn't mean dominating black people. It should mean equal treatment under that law. And that will bring law, and that is what law and order is.
It's really just that simple. And, you know, David said something that's very important. He talked about healing. And that's why I keep saying Joe Biden has to lean into the black community. Like, if you look at the way coronavirus is impacting the black community, if you look at the George Floyd protest, which is just the latest killing of a black person at the hands of the police, we all know why that is. Because America has not atoned, hasn't healed, you know, from its original sin, which is slavery. And all these underlying conditions caused by systemic racism make the black community so vulnerable to all the BS I just named. So based off all the wrongs this country has done to black people, whether it's slavery, segregation, mass incarceration, the war on drugs, all those wrongs that need to be corrected, the only path forward for this country is through the black community. And that's why I'm so hard on Democrats, because black people, we vote for them 90% of the time in all elections, but we haven't gotten the proper ROI. So we need Dems, especially Joe Biden, to atone through legislation and reparations, period. And from what I heard today in that speech in Philly, he sounds like he wants to do that. We just need Biden to, you know, stand. We would need him to stand on the foundational principles of what Democrats are supposed to be about, and that's civil rights and greater economic equality.
Yeah, Charlemagne the God, David Axelrod, thank you very much. Great discussion. Appreciate it. We'll be right back.